Good day, ladies and gentlemen. We are here today with Gerardo Butardo, Acting Deputy Director of the Bangko Sentral, Philippines, a very, very long-standing member of the Banking with the Poor network, and at present, the only representative from a regulatory authority on the network of Banking with the Poor. We are very pleased to have him today because the Philippines has played a very, very important role in educating the sector on collaborative efforts between the microfinance sector of practitioners and the regulatory authorities. May we ask you, Jerry, if you could tell us how you put the legal and regulatory framework in place in the Philippines to support financial services that are inclusive and carry out the government's mission and objectives in terms of supporting the poor through financial services.
Okay, thank you, Nina. First of all, the quick answer to that is uh, because the Bangko Sentral has make it a goal for poverty alleviation, and that was in 2000. The year 2000 was very crucial for microfinance in our country because the passing of the General Banking Law of 2000 has put on a provision that recognizes the characteristics of small loans and the other microfinance services. Because of that, the BSP, as I have said, declared microfinance as its flagship program for poverty alleviation, and that paved the way for the creation of the microfinance committee, a high-level microfinance committee, with the deputy governor of the supervision and examination sector sitting as the chairman, with 3 monetary board members and the microfinance consultant sitting as advisors. That also paved the way for the creation of a specialized unit called Micro, Small, and Medium Enterprise Finance Specialist Group, a specialist group that is dedicated to supervision and regulation of microfinance-oriented banks and banks engaged in microfinance. Through all this, the Bangko Sentral embarked on internal capacity building because the MSME Finance Specialist Group needs to be equipped with knowledge on how to deal with the microfinance services because it is entirely different from what the commercial banks are doing. So the support for microfinance started from that, and then later on in the decade, the goal was even becomes bolder into becoming a financial inclusion goal. And because of that, the Bangko Sentral put up a unit called the Inclusive Finance Advocacy Staff, a unit that is directly attached to the Office of the Deputy Governor of the Supervision and Examination Sector and is tasked for policymaking to ensure that the unserved and underserved clients are being included in the goals of financial inclusion. And because of that 2000 declaration of microfinance as the flagship program for poverty alleviation, the circulars are geared towards a microfinance-friendly environment. But although we also issued some prudential standards to ensure that the banks engaged in microfinance operates and not taking on so much risk that they are not prepared to handle.
Thank you, Jerry. Well, it's obvious that getting the framework right, and then there is the other challenge of putting the framework into practice. Now, traditional banking is something of a daily responsibility for you. However, microfinance intermediation is a relatively different type of business. How do you ensure that the mission, the mandate, and your responsibility and the need to enforce transparency, accountability, and good practice is actually implemented on the ground with these MFIs, who are a range of different types of institutional models and methodologies, and also diverse performance levels?
Yeah, okay. So thank you for that question. Let me start by saying that the Philippines, the banking system in the Philippines, is a graduate of the Directed Credit Program. The Directed Credit Program which flooded especially the rural banking sector in the 1970s, and as a result, failed in some aspect, especially on the Masagana 99 projects, Maisaganang Maisan project, the CBI-BRD, because of the mentality of the people that the loans are actually dole outs. So, because of our experiences with those directed credit programs, the the policymakers has now a wealth of knowledge on how to deal with small loans with no collateral. So, our policy approach is implemented on the ground because the examiners that belongs to the MSME Finance Specialist Group are also graduates from the examination of rural banking sector, which has experienced these previous implementations of government-directed programs. And our collaboration with other agencies like the Cooperative Development Authority and their regulation about the credit cooperatives and other types of cooperatives, our collaboration with the National Credit Council on how to regulate microfinance, and our collaboration with the Microfinance Council of the Philippines paved the way for the creation of a common standards. We call it the peso standards to reflect our monetary unit and allow all or required all microfinance institutions to subscribe to the common standards. I just want to mention the importance of the national strategy for microfinance that has been crafted in 1997 through the National Credit Council, to which Bangko Sentral is a very active member.
Thank you, Jerry. This is a very interesting juxtaposition of traditional banking principles, policies, put on to support a very national social mission with clients at the core and ensuring financial inclusion of those who have not yet been served. It seems to me that over the last 20 years, you've had to engage with a range of different practitioners. What has the relationship been like? Because the regulator is one that is normally perceived as an imposer of regulations. Can you tell us briefly, what has been the relationship like? You've put systems in place, but what is the perception of the practitioners of the regulatory authority, and how have you developed this relationship that I presume to be one that is built on a real shared objectives leading to collaborative, positive partnerships?
Okay, so thank you, Nina. Let me put it this way. Our relationship with regular banks is that a regulator and regulated entity. But for microfinance, we took a different approach. It is what we call a microfinance friendly approach because we believe that this is still the focal point of the financial inclusion. So towards this end, we crafted and issued circulars and regulations that, for example, allowed the mobile banking to flourish, which comes into two models, the telco-based model and the bank-based model, and also towards increased delivery channels through opening up of other banking offices, mini branches for microfinance institutions. And because of this increased delivery channels, the microfinance-oriented banks and banks engaged in microfinance were able to reach out for the previously unserved and underserved clients. In my presentation yesterday, I mentioned that roughly 36% of the total municipalities in our country still has no banking presence. And we position these increased delivery channels into reaching out for more microfinance clients. But our regulations, even if it is considered to be friendly, does not compromise prudential standards. So we also issue regulation that specifically address these standards. And that circular I can mention by number is Circular 409, which defines portfolio at risk, which we are one of the countries that measure it on a one-day basis, one-day default basis, and also required a very stringent loan loss provisioning requirement. If you compared it with the regular unsecured and regular secured loans. So our overall policy is, yes, we are a microfinance friendly, we want to have a microfinance friendly regulatory environment, but we clamp down on those who do not subscribe to the standards, who engage in unsound and unsafe banking practices, and does not engage in microfinance on a sustainable manner, but rather only to get the funds or having not so good intention. So again, we do not compromise prudential standards with being microfinance friendly.
Thank you, Jerry. Promoting the mission, protecting the customer, strengthening institutions, innovating products and delivery channels, and ensuring that the sustainability of the sector moves over the period of evolution. 20 years of collaboration, 20 years of friendship with the Banking with the Poor network. I would so like to thank you on behalf of BWTP. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you also.